Just being told that there's breaking news out of New York right now, and I want to get to Lisa Rubin, our colleague, on that. This is regarding the Manhattan case, the unprecedented felony criminal conviction of President-elect Trump. MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin is here with that. Lisa, what have we just learned?
So, Peter, we do have the letter that DA Alvin Bragg has sent to Manhattan Criminal Court Judge Juan Merchan, in which he says that he will agree to stay proceedings, which would mean staying both Merchan's decision on whether the verdict should be set aside and staying a sentencing, so that Donald Trump's team can file a different motion, a motion to dismiss the entire indictment. That's not something that has been on the table yet, but they say they support setting a schedule for briefing a motion to dismiss the entire indictment. That will be coming from Trump's team, and in the interim, they want Judge Merchan to stay all proceedings. That means we're not likely to see a decision from Judge Merchan about whether the verdict on the pre-existing trial should be set aside, because they've agreed sort of to set that aside and move on to the question of whether the indictment itself should be sustained. But in the interim, they are saying we want to stay all proceedings, but they will not agree that to dismiss the case outright. They do not support the motion to dismiss that will be coming from Trump's team. They say they intend to oppose that, Peter.
So, okay, that breaking news coming from Lisa Rubin right now out of Manhattan. We're joined now by the former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Catherine Clark as well. She's back with us. Catherine, I just want to get your reaction to this right now, what it means, and if you can put this in the big picture. This has been unprecedented from the start, but this is another sort of wrinkle in all of it.
It's more delay, and it's interesting because is this going to happen after Inauguration Day, and now it'll be President Trump? I should also note, the judge is the decider, not the Manhattan DA. So the judge could say, thank you very much for your opinion, Manhattan DA, but I'm going to do this. I think that Judge Merchan, as he's shown in September when the Manhattan DA didn't oppose adjournment, he'll probably go along with this. But it's just, delaying the inevitable. I mean, now it'll be President Trump because we're already at the end of November. So it'll be interesting if Judge Merchan says, I agree, and I'm just going to go along with both sides.
But, Catherine, what is the likelihood that not just the sentencing now delayed, but that the indictment could potentially be set aside altogether? It's understood that a president-elect, soon to be president, is not going to be serving time, but all of a sudden it would basically just erase this entire conviction?
I'm one of the few legal analysts that says that if Judge Merchan were to set aside this verdict, it would be defensible under the Supreme Court decision, not because of the hush money payment, but because of testimony that came in that occurred in the Oval Office when Donald Trump was president, because of a form that came in, because I believe the Manhattan DA's office response really was not that strong, not to be critical about why these were not official acts. And also in summation, the DA's office referred to one of those testimony from Hope Hicks as devastating evidence. So it's hard to now say it wasn't really important evidence, but that's just my opinion. But it is very rare that a judge in New York sets aside a verdict. So if we're going by those odds, Judge Merchan won't set aside this verdict.
Lisa, let me get back to you if I can very quickly, just to be clear that we understand this. So what are the next steps? What should we be watching for in the time frame for anything to happen left in this case as decisions remain to be made?
Yeah, Peter, I think what we should expect will happen next is that Donald Trump's team will file a motion to dismiss the entirety of the case and the indictment. That's a step further than would have happened even if Judge Merchan had vacated the jury's verdict. That just would have established the grounds for a new trial. Now they want to move to dismiss the case. And in this letter, this is the thing I really wanted to flag for you and our viewers, the DA's office is signaling it will oppose that motion, and they explain in a couple of paragraphs why, and I'd like to read from it if I could.
Please.
They're saying that no current law establishes that a president's temporary immunity from prosecution requires dismissal of a post-trial criminal proceeding, and that's where we are now, that was initiated at a time when the defendant was not immune from criminal prosecution, and that is based on unofficial conduct for which the defendant is also not immune. They also go on, Peter, to say that while they understand that there are constitutional concerns with respect to someone who is about to become the president of the United States, they say that while they deeply respect the office of the president and are mindful of the demands and obligations of the presidency, we also deeply respect the fundamental role of the jury in our constitutional system. And that goes back to something that I've been saying on our air earlier today and even last week when we first saw this decision to stay for at least a week. I expected that the Manhattan DA's office would have an interest in defending that verdict, not only because they believed in their case, but because of the precedent that it sets with respect to their recruitment of future juries. They do jury trials each and every day here in the island of Manhattan, and if they were to support the dismissal of the case, they are essentially saying to Alvin Bragg's constituency, Manhattan residents, that their service doesn't matter, that you can blow off jury service because, look, here's a case in which we asked people to come here and sit for 7 weeks at a time, and yet we're willing now to set that aside. That's not a precedent that the DA's office wants to set. They deeply believe in their case, but they also believe in the democratic imperative of jury service and setting the incentives right, Peter.
Lisa Rubin, Catherine Christian, stay with us. I want to get to Vaughn Hilliard, who's been covering the Trump campaign, now Trump transition for us. He's in West Palm Beach right now. And as we're speaking to you, Vaughn, over the course of this hour, we've now seen pictures that Donald Trump is preparing to head off to Texas to visit the SpaceX campus. Ted Cruz among those likely to be traveling with him today. Are we hearing anything from within Trump world to what happened here, and what sort of expectations do you have based on your conversations there?
No, I was just checking within the last 3 minutes, and we don't have any immediate response at this point in time. Of course, we'll wait to hear Judge Merchan's decision and, of course, the response from Donald Trump's defense lawyers. Of course, 2 of the 3 lead defense attorneys that Donald Trump turned to throughout that 7-week trial. He is now tapped to take the number 2 and number 3 positions at his Department of Justice, Todd Blanche and Emil Bove. This is, for Donald Trump, really a remarkable turn from where we were over the summer when Donald Trump was found guilty on these 34 felony accounts. He still had the 2 criminal indictments, the federal criminal indictments on his alleged removal of classified material to his Mar-a-Lago estate, as well as the allegations of the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Those were on the docket awaiting him. Of course, the Fulton County criminal indictment and the trial was still pending there. But you fast forward, not only has he won the presidency, but there is the now ever increasingly likely potential that he will never actually face any punishment for not only this case, but also knowing that Jack Smith in the Department of Justice have winded down their investigations and their pending trials into the 2 federal indictments, criminal indictments. And this is really for Donald Trump really a heck of a turn, and one in which now he is preparing to turn to his attorneys to run a Department of Justice and turn potentially and seek indictments and convene grand juries in order to investigate individuals who he said should have never brought these initial charges against him in the first place. Over the course of the last 2 years, he has been very vocal about his opposition to Alvin Bragg and has suggested that he should be removed from office and investigated. And so all of this is now coming to a head. We were looking at a potential sentencing right before Thanksgiving, but after winning this presidential election, this is a much different story that we are now following.
Vaughn Hilliard, I appreciate your reporting there. Our friend, the former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner, is joining us now. And Glenn, as we begin our conversation, I'm struck by what Vaughn just said, excuse me, and it's how there's very likely not to be any punishment of any kind for the 34 felony convictions that Donald Trump faced in Manhattan. Notably, it comes the same day that we're learning that Donald Trump now appears to be receiving intelligence briefings in spite of the charges against him for mishandling of classified documents over the course of the last several years after he left office. I want to get your reaction to what you're hearing from Manhattan right now and basically your takeaway from this, what you think this says to the American people.
Yeah, Peter, maybe there will be no punishment at the end of the day for Donald Trump, whom a jury found guilty of 34 felony crimes that at their core were designed to help him cheat in the 2016 presidential election. And I think the reason we're all sort of struggling to figure out where this is headed is because there are so many moving pieces, both legally and procedurally. I mean, legally, there is no precedent, no appellate court has ever had to wrestle with well, can you proceed to sentencing against a former president of the United States who was found guilty, who is also the president-elect and will be sworn in the not too distant future? It's not like American courts have ever had to rule on that. Now, procedurally, I think one of the challenges is Judge Merchan will first have to rule on whether the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling means he has to throw out these 34 felony convictions. I think maybe Lisa and Catherine would agree with me that, that doesn't seem to be a supportable position. But the procedural challenge right now, as I see it, is the minute Judge Merchan rules that, no, Donald Trump is not protected by presidential immunity, that would be immediately appealable. So he couldn't really proceed to sentencing anyway. So I think at the bottom of it all, I think it makes some sense to pause the case entirely, maybe even during the entire 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, so he could be sentenced the moment he leaves office. But none of this is easy or intuitive.
Yeah, Glenn Kirshner, Catherine Christian, Lisa Rubin, thank you all so much. Again, the headline breaking right now, the Manhattan DA has recommended that the judge hold off sentencing Donald Trump for the criminal hush money convictions there.